18 doctors stood helpless as alarms screamed through a private hospital room built by wealth and power. A billionaire's baby was dying, and nothing money could buy was working. Outside that room, a poor black boy named Leo Carter watched silently, ignored, doubted, and warned to stay back. He wasn't a doctor, he wasn't family, and he definitely wasn't supposed to touch the child everyone else had failed. But when the system ran out of answers, one forbidden decision would expose a painful truth about race, power, and who is allowed to save a life in America. What happens when the only solution comes from the voice no one wanted to hear? Comment and tell us where you're watching from. We love seeing how far these stories reach. And subscribe for more powerful stories that demand to be heard. Before the emergency, Leo Carter lived a life designed around staying out of the way. He woke early, moved quietly, and learned how to pass through spaces without drawing attention. The estate where he lived on the margins was not built for him. It was built to remind people like him where they stood, close enough to serve, far enough to never belong. His mother, Grace Carter, worked long shifts inside the mansion, cleaning rooms filled with wealth she could never touch. She taught Leo how to survive in places ruled by power. Keep your head down, speak only when spoken to, and never assume you'll be heard. Those lessons weren't about obedience, they were about protection. In a world that judged him before he spoke, silence felt safer. Leo carried something else with him, too. His grandmother, Miriam Carter, had raised him on quiet wisdom before she passed. She believed truth lived in details most people ignored. She taught Leo to observe, to notice patterns, to trust what his eyes and instincts told him, even when authority dismissed them. Her lessons stayed with him, shaping how he saw the world. Across the estate stood the mansion, a separate reality guarded by gates and confidence. Arthur Kensington lived there, a man used to solutions arriving on demand. His newborn son, Julian Kensington, was surrounded by specialists, machines, and the assumption that money could fix anything. Nothing in that house was left to chance, or so it seemed. Leo saw the baby only in passing, through glass and distance. He noticed how small Julian looked in rooms built too large, how fragile life could be even when wrapped in privilege. It unsettled him in ways he couldn't explain. The day everything began to change felt ordinary at first. The estate followed its routines. Staff moved as expected. Security watched familiar paths. But Leo sensed something off. Hurried footsteps, doors closing too fast, a tension that didn't belong to a normal day. That evening, Grace rushed past him, fear written plainly on her face. Lights stayed on longer than usual. Voices carried urgency through hallways meant for calm. No one explained anything to Leo. No one asked what he had seen. Standing on the edge of a world that never made space for him, Leo felt a certainty settle in his chest. Something was wrong, not just inside the mansion, but in the way people trusted titles while overlooking what was right in front of them. Leo had been taught to stay invisible. What no one had prepared for was the moment when staying invisible would no longer be an option. The estate shifted from polished calm to controlled panic in a matter of hours. Sirens cut through private gates that rarely opened in urgency, and lights burned late in rooms designed for quiet power. Inside the mansion, certainty began to crack. Leo Carter stood near the corridor outside the nursery, exactly where he was told to stay, close enough to hear alarms, far enough to be reminded he didn't belong. Security watched him carefully, their eyes lingering longer than necessary. Grace Carter moved between rooms with stiff shoulders, her face tight with fear. She didn't look at Leo, not because she didn't care, but because she knew what attention could cost. Inside the nursery, Julian Kensington was fading. Monitors screamed warnings no one could silence. Arthur Kensington paced the floor, his voice sharp with demand and disbelief. A senior physician, Dr. Sterling, spoke with forced calm, repeating explanations that sounded confident but solved nothing. 18 doctors, endless credentials, no answers. Leo watched through glass and reflection. That's when he noticed something that didn't fit. The bath basin. It had been prepared earlier and pushed aside when the alarms began, clean, unused, water still warm beneath the surface. Nearby, a decorative plant sat by the window, wrapped like a gift meant to impress. Leo's chest tightened. His grandmother, Miriam Carter, had warned him that danger often arrived quietly, dressed as normal. Her lessons returned all at once. Observe the room, not just the patient. Leo stepped closer. "Stay back," a guard said, firm and practiced. The words weren't about safety. They were about control. Leo froze, knowing how quickly curiosity could be mistaken for defiance. Inside, Julian's breathing worsened. His skin darkened to a color that made the room go silent. Arthur demanded immediate action. Dr. Sterling ordered invasive measures. No one looked at the environment. No one considered what Leo was seeing. "I need to say something," Leo said, quietly at first. No one responded. Grace finally noticed him. Her eyes widened, fear overtaking caution. She shook her head slightly, begging him to stop. She had survived this place by staying invisible. She didn't want her son punished for breaking that rule. But Leo remembered Miriam Carter saying that silence could be deadly. "It's not just him," Leo said louder now. "It's the room." The reaction was swift and harsh. "Remove him," someone ordered. Hands reached for Leo's arms. His heart raced, not with fear but urgency. "The bath," he said desperately. "We need it, now." Arthur turned sharply. "What did he say?" Dr. Sterling dismissed it. "This is not the time for guesses." But nothing else was working. That's when Miss Beverly stepped forward. She had been brought in earlier to review environmental factors and largely ignored. Calm and composed, she met Arthur's eyes without hesitation. "He's right," she said. "Infants absorb toxins through air and skin faster than adults. Warm water can help draw it out if you act quickly." The room stalled. Authority hesitated. Julian's alarm spiked again. Arthur made a decision born of desperation. "Do it." The guards released Leo. He moved fast, hands steady despite the weight of every stare. He lifted Julian carefully, supporting the tiny body as nurses cleared space. The bath water rippled as Leo lowered the baby in, gently washing the skin, rinsing away what machines couldn't reach. He worked with focus, not panic, exactly as Miriam Carter had taught him when tending to fevers long ago. Miss Beverly guided the steps with short, precise instructions. Windows opened wider, air shifted, the room changed. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, Julian's breathing eased. The monitors steadied. Shock replaced arrogance. Silence swallowed authority. Arthur Kensington stared at Leo Carter, not as an interruption but as the person who acted when the system froze. But relief brought a darker question with it. Who had sent the plant? And why did it take a poor black boy, bathing a billionaire's baby, for anyone to finally listen? The room didn't erupt in relief. It froze. Julian Kensington lay still in Leo's arms, wrapped in a towel, water dripping onto the floor as monitors continued to blink with uncertainty. The alarms had softened, but the danger hadn't passed. Every breath the baby took felt borrowed, fragile, uncertain. Arthur Kensington stood a few steps away, his hands clenched so tightly his knuckles had turned white. For the first time in his life, he wasn't giving orders. He was watching, helplessly, as a poor black boy did what money, power, and 18 experts could not. Dr. Sterling reviewed the readings in silence. The authority he carried moments earlier had cracked. Credentials suddenly felt small when measured against results. Around him, nurses whispered, unsure whether to intervene or step back. Then Julian's heart rate spiked again. The room erupted into motion. Nurses moved forward, someone called for equipment. Panic surged back like a wave. "Stop," Miss Beverly said firmly. Her voice cut through the chaos. She stepped closer, her expression calm but unyielding. "The toxins don't leave instantly. If you overwhelm him now, you'll undo what's working." Dr. Sterling hesitated, torn between protocol and reality. His eyes shifted to Leo Carter, then back to the monitors. For the first time, he asked a question he should have asked earlier. "What do you see?" The question landed like a rupture in the room. Leo felt it immediately. the weight of being looked at instead of looked past. Just minutes earlier, he had been restrained, doubted, treated like a problem. Now the system was waiting for his answer. "The air," Leo said. "It's still trapped. He needs space, clean air. And warmth, not machines." Grace Carter, standing in the doorway, covered her mouth as tears spilled freely, not just from fear, but from the realization that her son had been forced to fight to be heard in a place that should have listened from the start. Arthur Kensington nodded once. "Do it." Windows were opened fully, equipment was pulled back, contaminated items were removed, the room transformed, not just physically but symbolically. Control gave way to listening. Slowly, agonizingly slowly, Julian's breathing evened out. The monitor stabilized. Silence fell, heavy and unavoidable. Dr. Sterling exhaled deeply. "He's stabilizing," he said quietly. The words carried shock, relief, and something harder to admit, humility. Arthur turned to Leo Carter, his voice unsteady. "You saved my son." It wasn't gratitude alone. It was reckoning. Then security entered with new information. The plan had been traced. The sender was Marcus Webb, a former partner, a trusted name, someone with access. The betrayal cut deep, but it also clarified everything. This hadn't been an accident, it hadn't been mystery or chance. It had been deliberate. As Julian Kensington slept peacefully for the first time that night, one truth settled over the room like a weight no one could escape. If Leo Carter had stayed silent, if he hadn't dared to touch the child he was never meant to touch, this story would have ended very differently. And the question no one could avoid now was simple and terrifying. How many lives are lost every day because the wrong voices are ignored? By morning, the mansion felt quieter, but not the kind of quiet that brings comfort. It was the kind that follows truth, the kind that lingers after something irreversible has been exposed. Julian Kensington slept peacefully beneath steady monitors, his breathing strong and even. The danger had passed, but the weight of what nearly happened remained heavy in the room. What almost took his life wasn't just poison, it was certainty. The kind of certainty that assumes answers only come from people with titles, not from a poor black boy who was never meant to be heard. Arthur Kensington stayed beside the crib long after the doctors stepped away. For the first time, power felt fragile in his hands. When he turned to Leo Carter, his voice carried no authority, only truth. "You didn't just save my son," he said quietly. "You showed us what we refused to see." Dr. Sterling finalized his report with visible hesitation. 18 experts had failed, not because the solution was impossible, but because the system wasn't built to listen to voices like Leo's. Protocol had spoken louder than humanity and almost cost a life. Grace Carter stood nearby, emotions crashing through her all at once. Pride, fear, relief. She had taught her son to stay invisible to survive. That night proved invisibility had limits. When she embraced Leo, it wasn't just a hug, it was release from years of silence. Miss Beverly remained calm, saying little. She didn't need to explain herself. Her presence alone reminded everyone that knowledge existed long before institutions decided whose wisdom mattered. What saved Julian Kensington wasn't innovation. It was ignored truth, finally respected when failure left no other option. The investigation moved quickly. Marcus Webb was exposed, arrested, and charged. His betrayal shocked those in power, but the deeper wound came from realizing how close the system came to letting a child die because it dismissed the wrong voice. Arthur Kensington made changes, not symbolic ones. Environmental checks became standard. Outside experts were welcomed. And when asked why, his answer was simple: because listening shouldn't depend on status. Before leaving, Leo Carter returned to the nursery one last time. Julian stirred softly, unaware of the fight waged on his behalf. Leo thought of his grandmother, Miriam Carter, and the quiet lessons passed down through generations. Lessons the world tried to ignore until it had no choice. This wasn't just a story about a baby who survived. It was about how many lives are put at risk when racism decides whose voice is worth hearing. So the question remains, How many truths are still being ignored simply because of who speaks them? If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe to Black Community Struggles for more powerful stories about justice, truth, and the fight to be seen. Don't forget to like the video. Your support helps these stories reach the people who need them most.